Okay, this is part 4 from pages 56 to 60, starting with movement through developmental sequences. Errors I kind of mentioned before, they don't just disappear all of a sudden. Students will slowly, an error will kind of fade out over time, so that can really be expected. I mentioned that, well, different languages obviously have different writing systems, and some people believe that the more different the writing system is from yours, the more difficult it will be to learn. Like if you come from a Romance language like Spanish or Italian and you learn English, well, at least you have the Roman alphabet. But if you're coming from Japanese or Korean, then you have this whole new alphabet to learn. It's interesting though, I haven't really noticed students from other writing systems necessarily having more problems than the Romance language students. Some people say, oh, that's because, in Asia, people are studying English, or other countries, people are learning at such a young age, and they're seeing English letters. It's possible, but it also could just be attributed to, as we talked about before, that the difficulty of learning is not necessarily directly correlated with the distance or the difference between the two languages. That brings up an interesting point that around the world, children are exposed to English letters and English language through the media quite a bit, and that's increasing. Whereas, if I want to learn French or if I want to learn Arabic, I was not necessarily exposed a lot to those languages as a child, like when I really have that super learning ability. So it could be that over time, we're going to see international students learning English much, much faster. In fact, I've already seen it, especially students from like Korea and Japan and China, and even the Arabic students. I've definitely seen that it seems that they're arriving here with a higher level of English than what I remember 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago. That's why it's sometimes hard. It's hard to really know how much exposure someone's had to English because of that, specifically English. Another thing we often teach is adverbs of frequency. That can be hard, like sometimes, never, usually, rarely, and we have rules for that in English, like I rarely, eat vegetables or something, and we have rules for that. But then some of the adverbs of frequency can be, like the word sometimes could be at the beginning of a sentence, like sometimes I play tennis, or I sometimes play tennis, or you can even put it at the end. I play tennis sometimes. This is something that can be kind of tricky to teach someone, from another language background, but you'll find having to do that quite a bit. And so we do have what we're calling a cross-linguistic influence. So in other words, your first language, what first language you come from does affect your English learning. We have a cross-linguistic influence, but we're not calling it necessarily like contrastive analysis hypothesis, because we feel that your first language influences you, especially like we said, pronunciation, but it doesn't necessarily control or determine exactly or predict the problems that you're going to have with English. We're trying to get our students, to that communicative competence level where they're not just studying grammar and learning what words mean different from the dictionary, but really get them to that point where they can use the language, obviously in a real situation.